Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to you. I'm Simon Beardsley from Lincolnshire Chamber of Commerce, and a very warm welcome to you. I'm afternoon session, which is focusing on explaining the financial support available to small businesses at this time. Thank you very much for joining us and connecting with us virtually this afternoon. It's something slightly different for us. We have run a number of these sessions over the past few days, and we have found them go really well in terms of people interacting with us and doing things in a slightly different way. It still feels a little bit strange from the normal networking where you're able to get in front of people and have wider conversations, but we do hope this is a practical way of doing things at this particular time. And I think it's fair to say that we are living through some pretty unprecedented times at the current time. As a Chamber of Commerce, we've been trying to help with support to our businesses in many different ways, some of them traditional and some of them new and some of them very new to us in terms of what we're trying to do. How are we going about that? Well, we've been trying to proactively contact our members to see what they're thinking, feeling and seeing at any one particular time. Through that, we've been able to support with lobbying, both on a national and a local basis. We've been looking forward as well. We've not just focused on the now, the current issue, but what we're trying to do is looking for a time when we're coming out of the crisis, coming out of the current issues and looking for sustainable and growth opportunities out the back of that too. If you haven't looked so far, we've been providing a lot of information on our website, our Corona-19 hub, links-chamber.co.uk. You'll find lots of tips and hints on the current situation. Also, another plug for our social media. If you aren't connected with us yet in terms of LinkedIn, please make sure you do so. More information about these sessions and more up-to-date information is sent out on that platform as well. And today, the session actually came about through feedback from members saying, can you get the information to us? Can we be included? And is there a way that we can continue to network? So what we've developed is something called ChamberConnect. These are a series of interactive virtual events that are designed to support both businesses and staff throughout this coronavirus crisis. Today, I'm delighted to have been joined by Richard Hallsworth from Nicholsons Chartered Accountants and also Kirsty McGregor from the Corporate Finance Network. I'm going to hand over to both Richard and Kirsty very shortly. What they're going to go through is an overview of the current situation. They'll be providing some signposting, some information, some help and some support. At the end, there'll be an opportunity to ask your questions and get them to answer some of the burning issues that you've got. The way to do that is either to register your question as we're talking, and you can do that by using the chat button, again, along the bottom of the screen there. Or if you click on the participants, again, you can raise a hand. And when we get to the end of the session, we'll let you ask the question directly to our experts. We're expecting the session today to last between an hour and 45 minutes. And I hope I'm now able to hand you over to Richard and to Kirsty. Richard, Kirsty, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. And hello, everybody. This is somewhat new for me. Quite used to presenting in front of people, but not in a virtual world. It's also interesting how you get a little glimpse into everybody's sort of home offices or bedrooms or lounges. But hopefully you can't see too much behind me. I just wanted to start really by a brief introduction. The last sort of 2.5 weeks have been probably some of the most testing that I've ever encountered. I've been doing this now for around about 20 years, and this has certainly been much more difficult than the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, we've been talking to clients that have had to close because the government have told them to, have lost all of their income because people just aren't coming in and maybe buying from them, or hairdressers that can't have clients in anymore, or just business owners that have just lost a lot of trade overnight because the economy has just started to sort of turn itself down. And one client told me last week that they'd lost 60% of their weekly turnover just in 1 week. So this really is a quite a serious situation, and I think the word of the moment is unprecedented, and the government have backed business and announced lots of measures and initiatives to help us all get through this. And that really is going to be the backdrop of my sort of talk today, what measures are available, and what should we be focusing on. But before sort of I jump into that, I wanted to get somebody to cover what was happening on a national picture, because sometimes we all know maybe what's going on in Lincolnshire, but it's interesting to see that we're not alone, and that businesses across the UK are all facing the same sort of challenges. And we're part of a national network of accountancy firms, all of a similar size. And Kirsty McGregor, who's on the line today, has been spearheading a campaign to try and get more support for businesses. And actually, that work's been going on for the last week, but it's hit the headlines today and is top of the BBC News business pages. So in between sort of telephone calls with the BBC, Kirsty's come on here today just to give us a bit of an overview. So if I can just pass you over to Kirsty, she's just going to talk to you for a few minutes.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy day, and what you were saying about home offices, my dogs have just arrived back from their walk, so if you can hear a bit of noise in the background, I do apologise. So I think between dogs and we've got a baby, I can see Vicky's bouncing on her knee, so between us I think we're showing the whole aspects of life. It is absolutely crazy time. I've never known anything like it, and I worked through the credit crunch. It's quite different from that. The hope is that this lockdown doesn't last too long, and we can indeed bounce back quite quickly. Our concern has been at the Corporate Finance Network, of which Nicholsons are, as he said, Richard said, is a member firm representing us exclusively in the Lincolnshire area. The concern that we've had is that it's unknown how long this lockdown is going to be for, and in the meantime cash flow is obviously critical and lacking, and the longer it goes on, the more damaging it's going to be. And we recognise at the Corporate Finance Network that talking to all of our firms across the country, advising between them around about 20,000 business clients, that the solutions so far are not working. They're not sufficient for a lot of businesses, and obviously the fact is, the matter is, the money may be on its way, but you may be waiting 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks before it actually lands in your bank account. So that is a real critical thing. I'm going to leave Richard to talk about the detail of the various support schemes. I know he's going to cover those. And unfortunately, as Richard has said, I'm going to have to jump off and leave you after I've finished speaking. The research that we did, I didn't want to go out as a real negative piece in the press. It was data that I didn't want to publicise. But the only reason that we have publicised it is because there's actually a real positive angle that we're trying to get across here to the Treasury and the Chancellor. And I don't know if any of you have ever been involved in lobbying in the past or trying to get messages through to national government, but it's really difficult at the best of times. And now the lobbying channels seem to be absolutely clogged full, and we just cannot get our thoughts through. And we are the SME experts, especially in finance. We understand how owner-managed businesses work, what they'll accept, what they're capable of doing, and what the real practical issues are going to be for SMEs. And when the Sybil's loan scheme, for example, as one example, was launched in a great, Rishi Sunak said you can go into your bank next week and talk to them about a loan. We knew that wasn't going to be the case, because the structure of that loan does not suit a lot of businesses, and unfortunately the media sound bites are confusing people, and similarly with the self-employment scheme, that's not applicable to limited companies, and I don't think that was particularly clear when it was first announced. So there is a lot of confusion, and that brings with it ultimate disappointment for a lot of businesses. And what we wanted to do with this research was really use the press to get the attention of the Treasury, of the Chancellor, because one of the solutions that we're suggesting is, over and above everything they've already done, is that we do think that 18% of businesses may have to close within 4 weeks, because this cash just isn't coming quick enough. And we know most small businesses do not have cash reserves to fall back on, and they live hand to mouth. and I think something like 1.2 million limited companies. And obviously there's more unincorporated, but 1.2 million limited companies have less than 10,000 net assets. That's a third of all the limited companies in the country. So you can see that most businesses, much like yours, I suppose, haven't got a great deal of money sat there waiting to use, even if you're using VAT savings or income tax savings at the moment. So the story, we managed to get some surveys done very quickly from my member firms, and Richard's firm contributed, and I'm very grateful for that. And that 18% of SMEs may have to close within 4 weeks. And if this lockdown goes on for up to 12 weeks, then that becomes almost a third of SMEs. And that is real, crisis time for the whole economy, given the amount of employees that you all employ. But our positive solution, if you like, one of our suggestions is that we would really like an incentive to come in for businesses to buy other businesses in their sector and pick them up and turn them around, because we know there's some good savvy business owners that are very experienced at running business and would be able to make a better job of running this business maybe than some other business owners. And if those in a sector are willing to pick up the failing ones and take on the employees, we think there should be a massive incentive for businesses, and a thank you from the government for doing that. So a mixture of a grant for taking on the employees and substantial grant, and tax reliefs later on for capital gains tax and income tax and corporation tax reliefs. So that's our plan, because we know that businesses normally are not very acquisitive anyway, SMEs, and what we're asking for then is to expect these businesses in this really strange time to go over and above their normal instincts and not say, it's too much hassle for me, it's too stressful, but actually step up to the plate and say, okay, I'm going to pick up that competitor and I'll turn that business around, hopefully. And if I don't, my risk will be minimal, because the government have supported me to try. And I think that's one solution that maybe around the corner. We're hoping it's around the corner, and that's the reason for all this press. Unfortunately, the media, as usual, pick up the negative stories, they pick up the bad news angle, and they're not really covering the positive side too much. But we plough on and we keep going. So there's a whole load of support out there, lots of different ways, some practical things you can do for yourself, as well as the government support. And your accountants are best placed to advise you on this. I would obviously recommend Richard Hallsworth at Nicholsons as one of the best firms in the Lincolnshire area, the only firm that we have in the network for corporate finance and fundraising. So I'm going to hand back to Richard now, and I'm going to let him take over with the detail. But I wish you all the best of luck, and we'll get through this with that little baby on your knee. But I'm going to shoot off now because I've got the BBC News Channel waiting to interview me. So I'll leave you to it. And over to you, Richard. Well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty. That gives you a bit of an overview of some of the national news around this. It is really important that we all sort of sit down and have a good think about how our businesses are going to survive this. Last week, I think survival was the one word that I probably used most when I was talking to clients. And I think that we're going to have to go through 4 phases with this. Last week there was or the week before, there was almost like a shock. When I was talking to clients, people were sort of like in disbelief that first of all the government had decided to close pubs from that moment. And we talked to cafe owners, pub owners, restaurants, hotels, and there was just a huge amount of shock. And I think by the time we got to sort of the Monday, the 16th, 17th, that had hit us. We were sat there having long conversations about how we get 40 people working from home quickly, how we make sure that we're looking after each of those team members' well-being. And it was just relentless. It was sort of fix and move on, and fix another problem and move on. And I'm not ashamed to say that I closed my laptop on the 17th of March. It'll stick with me for a long time, after 20 hours continuous work. And I just cried, because it was just the shock of what we'd had to deal with. But Conversations with clients eased up last week. People started to become a little bit more comfortable that, you know, this had happened and we were where we were and we've just got to sort of get on it. That kind of British spirit kind of came out, I suppose. And I think we've moved on to the kind of the secure phase now, where we've got to work hard to secure our businesses and to make sure that we're equipped with, you know, the right amount of cash and the right plans to sort of get us through to probably the end of March. And those measures are what I'm going to talk about in detail, really, in a few moments. Following the secure phase, I think, you know, we're into recovery. You know, how do we get back sort of going? What planning do we need to do? And, you know, I think there's a real good opportunity here to have a look at your business and to really think about how you want it to look when you do sort of get back to normal. And I think there is a good opportunity to take a bit of a break. And, you know, I don't like the phrase take time out of the business, but, you know, there is time to sort of think and maybe restructure things. And also, you know, we're all going to need some long-term funding because, you know, we're having to use money to cover losses because income's dropping. And therefore, you know, we're going to have to look for a longer-term funding solution. And as Kirsty said there, you know, I'm with her on this, that I'm not convinced that the support from the banks is going to be there for all businesses. I think it will be for many, but I think there will be a small number or maybe a large number of businesses that it's not. So we've got to look for some longer term funding, and we've got to be really innovative in how we do that. And then, you know, the final phase, I can't decide whether this is reopen or rebuild, but it's one of the same. You know, we've got to think about how we get going again. You know, how do those pubs and restaurants and cafes go from sort of zero to open? And that will need some thinking about and some planning as well, and probably a little bit of cash. But I'm fairly sure from talking to people that, you know, there will be a little bit of a bounce when we can sort of start going out there. Social distancing, I'm fairly sure, will be there for some time to come. But, you know, as they start to release some of the restrictions and get the economy going again, I'm fairly sure that, you know, the British spirit will see us through that, and we'll go out there and support our small businesses. So specifically in terms of the government measures that have been announced, I wanted to start by talking through the self-employed scheme. So this is something that was announced quite late, and I think it's interesting that there have been a wave of different measures and announcements from the Treasury and from government. And, you know, in some cases they seem to be responding to the next problem and fix and then move on. And I think, you know, the self-employed scheme probably was kind of in there from the start. I mean, it was certainly in the Coronavirus Act as an amendment, and it stuck. But it was announced a bit later than the job retention scheme. So it was almost like they solved the job retention, or they solved the job situation, then they moved on to self-employed. And I guess now they're thinking about directors of small companies. So the self-employed scheme, SEISS is the snappy title, was designed to help self-employed. With all of these schemes, they seem to have built in some safety mechanisms, and you have to be eligible to join this scheme. It doesn't apply to directors or owners of limited companies. It only applies if you're a sole trader, partnership, or a LLP. Those who haven't yet submitted a tax return, so for people that started trading, let's say in April 2019, it doesn't, you're not eligible because you needed to have filed a 2019 tax return. There are, I guess, a number of people that for whatever reason haven't filed their 5th of April 19 tax return, and the government have given people 30 days from this announcement, so up to the 23rd of April, to get that 2019 tax return filed. And then finally, you know, there were two financial measures. It won't apply for people with a trading profit over 50,000 in 2018-19, or more than 50,000 on average for the past 3 years. And also, self-employment has to be more than 50% of your total income. So if you have income from other sources, that means that your self-employment income is a small proportion. Maybe it's a weekend job, maybe a photographer that goes out and does some wedding photography at the weekend. If that income from self-employment is under 50% of your overall income, then you won't be eligible for it. HMRC have tried to clarify some of those eligibility criteria, and, you know, people have got to continue to trade in 1920. They are allowed to be closed if it's relating to coronavirus. You know, so you would have expected to have been trading if coronavirus and the impact of that hadn't hit. You intend to continue to trade in 2020 and 21. And most importantly, you know, you've lost profits due to coronavirus. So we had quite a wide ranging discussion internally, because there will be some businesses actually out there that are doing okay at the moment. So we're hearing that people in the food sectors, you know, they're doing okay. Butchers, those sorts of businesses that are still open, that are supporting the economy, are supporting vulnerable people. You know, they're doing okay. Maybe farmers might be in the same sort of situation. They might not lose profits due to coronavirus, and there is some thought process that when you apply for this, you will be asked to make some sort of statement about that. How they'll test that, I don't know. Probably on the tax return there'll be some more sort of tick boxes to select. But at the moment, yeah, we are saying to people that you probably should think carefully whether you will qualify if you haven't lost profits. So I think if you do qualify, then you're looking at receiving 80% of average monthly profits. At the moment, they haven't defined what trading profits are, and this is something that we're seeing you know, in all of the guidance, that there's a lag between you know, Rishi Sunak standing up you know, next to Boris Johnson and making a big announcement, and then the detail coming out. It took them nearly 2 weeks to get the detail on the job retention scheme out, and the same is with the self-employment scheme. It does say that it's based on trading profit. We can only assume that that's the final profit on your tax return that you pay you know, your tax on, and that's because the government have said that HMRC have got all of the information they need, and actually they can't start going back, adding back depreciation and adding back capital expenditure, because it would just be a mammoth task. So we assume it's on trading profits, and you know, that causes a problem for some people, because I was talking to a guy yesterday who had invested quite heavily in his business over the last 2 years, and actually his profits have been quite low because of that investment, and he's set to receive a much smaller amount than actually his underlying profits would have suggested. So it's something to just watch out for. But no, you will receive 80% of your average monthly profits. So the simple way to work that out is to take your trading profits for the last 3 years, average those out. So you've got one figure, divide it by 12, take 80% of that, and that's roughly what you should receive. This will be taxable income. So in the current year, it will be shown on your 2021 tax return. And we expect that you'll receive the money sometime in June 2020 in a single lump sum payment. There will be some application process to run through, but HMRC have been quite clear that they will come to you, and everything will be done through the .gov website. It's really important to avoid texts, emails, and other things like that. The guidance actually on the revenue website says you will access the scheme only through gov.uk. If someone texts, calls, or emails claiming to be from HMRC saying that you can claim financial help or are owed a tax refund, and asks you to click on a link or give information such as your name, credit card, or bank emails, it's a scam. So you know, they're watching out all the time for people that are trying to take advantage, but they're saying that everything will be done through the .gov website. And I imagine that because we've all got tax accounts, it will be done through the tax account. So that's the self-employed scheme, and I'm happy to go through any questions on that later as far as I can. So to cover off the other measures that have been announced that self-employed traders, business owners might be able to tap into. For those of you that are VAT registered, the VAT liabilities that would have fallen due between the 20th of March 2020 and the 30th of June 2020 won't be collected. So there's going to be an automatic deferral of those amounts, and that covers those VAT returns for the periods February, March, and April, so a full VAT quarter. The two really important things to bear in mind here. The first is that if you pay your VAT by direct debit, then you need to cancel the direct debit. They have said that they will still collect it via direct debit if that's how you pay. So please, if you do, cancel direct debits. And the second thing to watch out for is that the May return will actually still be due. So if you think about the timescales for VAT, you now pay 7 days and a month after the return period. So the May liabilities are actually due on the 7th of July and therefore fall outside of that window. So it's just a bit of thinking ahead and a bit of planning on that. In terms of income tax, again, there was a quick announcement saying that they were going to allow people to defer their July payments on account. So for all of those that have got payments on account due on the 31st of July, they will now be automatically deferred until the 31st of January 2021. That does cause its own problems in that you're going to have the payment on account, the second payment on account that would have been due in July, due plus the balancing payment in January plus the payment on account for the next year, and that could cause some quite significant liabilities. Our advice on this is, get your accounts done quickly so that you know what your liability is going to be, and then you can start planning for that. Pay as you earn, that's the one tax that employers haven't seen an automatic deferral on. Therefore, if you do employ people and are looking to save some cash by deferring your pay as you earn, you need to call the time to pay team. The number is on our blog, which I'll give you details of later. What we're hearing at the moment is that they're quite happy to automatically defer collection of pay as you earn for the periods month 12, which will be March, April, May and June. And you don't need to talk to them at the moment about making a proposal to pay that liability. They're quite happy just to say, yes, we're happy to defer it, come back to us later when you know how you're going to pay it back. Because at the moment, we just don't know how long this is going to go on for, and we don't know the impact on each individual business to make that assessment. So they are being very understanding and very helpful. And this is a pattern that we saw in the financial crisis, that the time to pay arrangements that HMRC allowed were very supportive, and they seem to be again. I'm not going to talk too much about the job retention scheme and this new term that we all now know of called furloughing, because tomorrow, I think at 2 p.m, Ollie Tasker from Wilkin Chapman is going to be doing another session on that. The only thing I do want to say on it is that it's a really good way to retain good staff. It's a good way to support people through this crisis, and it has a real positive impact on cash flow. £2,500 up to 80% of an employee's wages, is a big boost for those people that would have had to lay staff off. The other thing I'd say, which is why I'd listen in tomorrow, is that employment law surrounds all of the issues with furloughing employees, and it's vital that people take employment advice on it and don't just jump into it. But from a commercial sort of business perspective, a good way to retain good staff, and it can positively impact on cash flow. So something that I would be looking at. On to grant schemes that are available. These were two of the first announcements. The first was for businesses that qualify for small business rates relief or rural relief. They will receive a grant of up to £10,000, or actually £10,000, delivered by the local authorities, so West Lindsey District Council, East Lindsey, North Kesteven, Lincoln City Council, I think, if they're all of them in our area. Each will have an application process. West Lindsey's is on their website. You put your details in, and it goes through their system, and you should receive a grant of £10,000. We've had a couple of situations where clients have had other, I was going to say random reliefs, but there are certainly reliefs I've never heard of that are specific to their industry, and it's worth just checking that you do get the small business rates relief or the rural relief, because they're the qualifying criteria for those. And the other grants that are available through the local authorities are specific to retail, hospitality and leisure. So if you have a property that has a rateable value between £15,000 and £51,000, you'll receive a £25,000 grant. together with a 12-month holiday on rates. And if you are over £51,000 rateable value, you'll receive a 12-month holiday. I think it's important there just to mention that if you actually have a number of properties, it's based per property, not overall per business. So that's something just to bear in mind if you've got a number of properties that you trade from. Two more things for me to mention really. The first one is rent relief for commercial properties. There is a 3-month grace period now the government have built in to stop landlords evicting tenants if they don't pay their rent. That's not really the full story though, because under that scheme you would be liable for the rent on the 1st of July. Therefore, we're encouraging all clients to pick up the phone to the landlord, have some sensible conversations with them, and try and agree a repayment period afterwards. And the one that seems most common is paying it back at between July and March. So effectively, having a good long period to make repayments of that rent holiday. And that seems to be something that is being supported by landlords. Some landlords have got their own problems because they need the rent to pay the mortgage. And again, we are waiting for some initiatives to be announced that maybe will support some landlords. And the final thing that I wanted to mention really was support through the universal credit system. Again, one of the first announcements that was made was that the minimum income floor was being abolished for self-employed people. And that was where when they made assessments for benefits, they based it on an assumed minimum income that they expected every self-employed person to receive. And that was based on the number of expected hours multiplied by the minimum wage. And they abolished that in one of their first announcements. And again, we've been encouraging people to sort of go through that system and see whether there's any extra benefits there that they can tap into if they feel they need to. And I guess before I open it up to questions, a note on directors of small companies. At the moment, there isn't a scheme that covers directors. As you probably know, some people trade through a limited company and they have a small salary and they have dividends to top that up. And one of the issues is that they're not self-employed or classed as self-employed, so they don't qualify for the self-employed scheme. So they would have to furlough themselves and then go through that, but only receiving a small amount of salary means that they don't get a huge amount of income that way. And the restrictions on the job retention scheme say that you can't work, and that makes it really difficult if you're a sole director. So we are expecting them to be some more guidance. Whether they'll actually introduce a new scheme, not so sure, but certainly we're expecting some guidance on that particular issue. Just finally as well, I suppose, just to cover that off on the self-employed scheme, they have said that self-employed traders will be able to continue to work whilst receiving this benefit, which is a big difference between that and the job retention scheme. I didn't produce any slides purposely because they would have changed probably by tonight. So our blog, which can be accessed at blog.nicholsonscharteredaccountants.co.uk, that has a page on there with a whole load of advice, a lot of it that I've just talked through, and we are trying to keep that up to date on a daily basis. So that's where I would go to, and maybe if Simon and the team have got the capability of emailing that out to participants, they can do. But it's blog.nicholsonscharteredaccountants.co.uk. Simon, that's me done, so back to you.
Okay, so yeah, Richard, we can send some information to everybody on the call tomorrow, so we'll include that information for you. It's an opportunity now for people to ask their questions. But for the self-employed, can you take a temporary PAYE job, say in a supermarket, and still claim 80% of the profits?
So this is where I'm going to sit on the fence, I guess, because the guidance isn't at all clear on that point. And we are expecting that when they release the proper guidance, that they will fall one side or the other on that. So my take on it is that the self-employed scheme has been designed to be more flexible than the job retention scheme. and you know, it's likely that people probably could take a job to supplement their income if they needed to. I mean, it is going to be taxable, so at the end of the day, they're receiving that cash benefit, and it will be taxable like employment income would be taxable. But my gut feel is that they will allow it because they're being more flexible, and they're allowing self-employed people to continue to work. But the guidance certainly isn't out on that, and it's something that we were talking about in quite a lot of depth yesterday. I think the only other thing I'd say on that is that, you know, needs must as well. So I was talking to somebody that had lost, you know, nearly all of their self-employment trade overnight, and you know, that's something that they needed to deal with, and you know, they just decided to go and get a job at one of the supermarkets to supplement their income because needs must. But yeah, in terms of whether they'll still be eligible, I'm not so sure on that.
Okay, so another question for you, Richard, is at present we're still operational, and the questioner is a farming contractor and a contract pest controller. According to the most recent government advice, we appear to be outside the scope of any assistance should our business or income fall. My immediate concern is that invoices that we raise in the next 28 days, if we don't receive payment due to customers' hardship going forward, what assistance is going to be available and what course of action can we take without entering into the realms of bank loans, which the questioner says surely will create problems further down the line. So in terms of things getting worse in the short term, there's a knock-on implication, I suppose, there in terms of if you don't get paid, what options are there for you to take? Okay,
and I assume that that person's trading as a limited company at the moment, so they wouldn't qualify for the self-employed scheme, or that they're thinking that they're going to have to wait to get the money in June. Yeah. So that is a real problem and a real issue. You know, I'm talking to all of my clients and those that are in acute financial distress, as I'm calling it. You know, I'm telling them just to mothball their business and don't pay anything or anybody, and there's going to be a knock-on effect of that. You know, we saw a significant fall in the amount of our receipts over the last couple of weeks, and every business will be trying to keep as much cash as possible. So, you know, that is a real problem and could lead to some problems. I guess the simple answer is that there are a number of different funding options out there that could be used to plug the gap. So one of those may be to look at some spot invoice finance, so whereby you effectively sell that invoice to a specific invoice finance provider, and they would advance money against it. It's not going through a full invoice finance system where you have to be audited and where it's a long-term thing. It's just on an invoice by invoice basis. Again, it's not the cheapest, but that would be an option in those circumstances, just to cover a short-term cash position until either the grant was received, if you're self-employed. If you're a limited company, it's a bit more difficult because that grant's not coming in. But that's what I would look at, would be some sort of funding, short-term funding based on invoices.
Just going back to some of the queries around almost second jobs and receiving back entitlement. So somebody who's self-employed, will they still be entitled to the 80% if they go on to universal credit?
The universal credit system will take in your income, and as I understand it, you have to contact them if your circumstances change. So if you were to call them now and say that your circumstances had changed and your income had fallen, and they made an assessment, you would presumably then have to go back to them and say that you'd received income in future months, which could be a bit messy. I also understand that there's a huge backlog of universal credit claims, which probably isn't helping. But that would be my where I think that would probably sit.
Okay, another one on universal credit. Are you able to claim universal credit as a director of a business? I set up a business in January and don't qualify for other schemes at present.
Yeah, as I understand it, you can.
Okay, another universal credit one. In terms of universal credit, do you know if the spouse's income is still taken into account? and also savings of more than 16,000. Is both parties added, or are both parties added together?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that, but I will go and have a look at that, and I'll email you so you can let people know.
Okay, so that can come out on the information that we send out afterwards. Just some quick questions again in terms of some of the grants that are going to be payable. Is there an element of tax that you need to take into account on some of those grants? Are they taxable? Are they tax free?
The local authorities don't know that at the moment. My gut feel is that they won't be taxable. But again, the guidance isn't out to tell us. But my gut feel is that they wouldn't be.
Okay. So I've got another question that came in, and that's I've been self-employed throughout the qualifying years, but I'm currently on maternity leave until the 19th of April and claiming maternity allowance until then. I'm unsure if this will reduce or prevent a claim. I realise this might not be something that have a clear answer to at the present time, but thought it worth asking. Additionally, my 3 qualifying years have 1 year of losses and 2 years of profit. My assumption is that the average earnings will be including the loss, but wondered if this could, I wondered if you could confirm this. I get my teeth in. I wonder if you can confirm this.
Yeah, no, I think the average will take into account losses. And actually, I've asked the same question about maternity allowance because I've got a client in exactly the same situation. My initial sort of thoughts to them was that a business has to pay self-employed people, and they just get a top up on the maternity allowance. So my initial reaction is that I think it probably will be allowable, but again, that is a question I've asked, and I'll come back to you with an answer to that one.
Okay, so I asked this question to one of our panelists yesterday, and it's almost a question for your benefit, but I'm sure you won't take it that way. In terms of when a business is coming to a stage where they need to think about support, so things are maybe falling outside of the normal sphere of their control, and they need help, and they're looking for help and support. Why come to an accountant for a start? What's the benefit of coming to someone like yourself?
So I'm quite happy to answer this because actually, I can see a few clients on the call, but many aren't. I would go to your accountant first off because they know you, they know your business. They probably have worked with you for a long time. We've got clients that we've worked with for 30 and 40 years. They will understand your personal circumstances as well, your finances. They'll prepare your tax returns. They'll have all of the information available to make quick assessments. So, for example, we produced a spreadsheet the day after the self-employed scheme was announced that calculated based on the broad brush information that we've been given at the moment, exactly how much we thought clients that would qualify would get, so that we could call back those that we'd talked to that were really panicking, and give them a rough idea as to what they might have. I think we're in a unique position to enable that level of reassurance quite quickly. And as Kirsty said, accountants are really the experts when it comes to looking at funding and finance and the different options that are available, knowing you and your business. So it's quite an easy one for me, Simon, because I just think we are in a perfect position, and if this is a time where we need to step up to the mark and really be counted, because we can add value. We're not just being counters. We actually can help businesses, and we've had more emails from clients over the last couple of weeks than I think we've probably had over the last year, thanking us for the help and support that we've given, and the fact that we were making phone calls at weekends, and I just think that we're in a perfect position to help businesses at the moment.
Okay, so I'll just encourage anybody with any last questions. We're getting to about that 45-minute time. So any further questions, please put your hand up at this stage, or put something through on the chat. If there is nothing else, which I can't see any hands up at the moment, or anything on the chat line at the moment, I'll keep my eye on that. I'm just going to round things up by firstly thanking everybody for joining us today. Thank you for spending the last 45 minutes in our company. We hope you found that really useful, and we provided some signposts, if not total answers, to situations you're in currently or maybe in the future as well. Just to let you know that we have got some more ChamberConnect webinars coming up. Tomorrow at 2 until 3, Richard mentioned earlier about the job retention support scheme update, and I think that probably will be more focused on the furloughing of workers or employees tomorrow again. There's some further updates since the last webinar. We'll be talking to some of our local authorities about the business rate support schemes that they've got running, something that Richard mentioned earlier. But certainly in Ask the Expert question, a number of local authorities are providing individuals who will be put up there to be able to answer questions on that. One where you can ask questions of the Local Enterprise Partnership, just to see views from their chair and chief executive about the sort of things that they are doing and the information that would help them going forward to promote either issues that we are having within the county or to look at opportunities for further down the line as well. Moving on from that, we're looking at stress in workforce and teams and helping and supporting remote workers as well. So watch out for those further down the track as well. You can register for all of those on our website at links-chamber.co.uk/events. If you've got any further ideas or comments on the webinar series that we've got, events@links-chamber.co.uk is the website, is the email address where to send those comments to. I'd like to thank once again Richard. I'd like to thank Kirsty for her earlier part as well. I'd like to thank you once again for joining us. Thank you and have a productive afternoon.